but I thought we have about 10 to 15 minutes left, and it might be really nice to bring it into a slightly wider conversation. And I wondered, so there was something that you brought in at the end, Jess, that also appeared in the last session. That is very much about, you know, that kind of, I'm missing the word. There is a dilemma that we all face, which is that by, especially in the community-led movement, that is by sort of taking things into our hands and changing the places that we live in for the better, for the quality that we would love to have and love to live in. We also speed up or at least around us speeds up the gentrification process, or prices rise, or that is a real danger. And I was just interested. So I wonder, Jess, if you want to summarize for us one more time your what can we do? And then I would really like to hear from Gala, like, because you must have been thinking around this when you were in government. What can you do from maybe more the government perspective, and what have you been trying to do that? And then let's open up to other people. But Jess, would you mind to just remind us of what your hot tips were?
Buy it. I mean, I think I've worked for locality for a long time, and so I've got to see a whole load of different community action all over the country. And the really inspiring ones are when communities can see value in something that no one else sees value in. So Coin Street was mentioned on an earlier call. The only reason Coin Street exists is because people could see that there was value there. They wanted to do something there, and they got in at a point where they could buy 13 acres of the south bank of the Thames for £1 million. So obviously £1 million is £1 million, quite a lot, but they were able to get a loan from the Greater London Authority, as it was at the time, and buy that space. That is now among the most expensive real estate in the world. You know, so you have to get in there quick. You have to get in there while it's still, while other people are not seeing the value. And this is why we have a phrase in Hastings: it's too late for Hackney, not too late for Hastings. You know, there are some places where I really wouldn't know how to do it, where land and buildings are so ludicrously expensive that it's almost impossible. But that isn't true yet of Hastings, and it isn't true yet of Liverpool, although Liverpool is in the top 10 places for house price rises in the last 6 months. So, you know, you need to get on with it. But yeah, my thing is, somehow or other, you have to buy it. And I know that Nudge in Plymouth, if they could buy the whole of Union Street now for £4 million, I feel like it's our duty to try and help them to buy the rest of Union Street, and it's our duty to try and help each other to take some of these properties that are currently undervalued and to bring them into community ownership before it's too late.
Gala, do you want to?
Yeah, well, 3 things. First of all, a small anecdote. But at the beginning, when we entered the city council, I was talking to one of the municipal workers that was involved in urban reform for a long time. And we were talking about some reforms we wanted to do in a neighborhood that is like very depressed. And I told him, okay, we have to do this public investment, but we have to try to think which kind of mechanism do we have to activate in order that this public investment does not provoke that there are people that are living in the houses because the rents get higher because of this place getting better. And he told me, oh, it's very interesting what you're saying. Like, in 40 years I've been working in the city council, no one has asked me for that. They actually have always asked me for making urban reform in order to regenerate the social inhabitants that were in a depressed zone, which, well, for me was like very illustrative, like very shocking how making public investment in public space was. It's not about renovating buildings, but it was really So the other thing would be we try a lot of things in order to stop gentrification. Although I always say that gentrification does not exist. It's called capitalism, because actually it's like a kind of dynamic that capitalism has. And in this sense, we actually activated a kind of department that had to work in a transversal way in order how to, I don't know, like every time that you make public investment in order to reform a place, a street or whatever, you will always have social housing reserve in order to compensate, something like that. But I would say this initiative of having this transversal department against gentrification failed because of the competences, also because of a public, at least Spanish public administration, not being able of work in a transversal way. But the second, in order to finish with a positive point of view, I would say, like, for example, last year or 2 years ago, the tenant union in Catalonia, which is also like a big social movement for housing rights, they were putting pressure in the Catalan government in order to approve a law to to limit the rent, to guiding the rent. And for me, one of the interesting things there was not just saying, okay, you can't pay mostly that for a house, but also if you if a tenant leaves the house and there's another one coming, the next contract cannot be higher than the other one. So it avoids, well, I mean, the limits are very high and there are things that have to change still, but it avoids that you as a landlord have this interest in order to change the tenant in order to being able to increase the rent. So I would say you have, well, the most important thing in order to fight gentrification is this idea of protecting the housing right in order of making a house or home a fundamental right and not a market good, which is in our case in other competence levels, but I think it. And there's also something that we tried to implement, but we didn't achieve. But I think it was like a good initiative. And actually, I will try to summarize it. But it was trying to that when you make a public investment in a public space in order to renovate it and make it better, you have the possibility in a legal way in Spain to make that the landlords of the buildings that surround this area pay part of the reform. This is something that normally is not applied. So what we tried to look at was the mechanism of saying, okay, you won't pay the reform, this reform, but if you sell the building in the next 5 years, you will pay 70% of what you would have to pay from the reform. If you sell it 10 years later, you will pay 35%. So in order to crush the idea of benefiting in a private way from the public investment. This was something that actually I started to negotiate with the Department of Economy, and I didn't. I failed. So that's. But I will say there are mechanisms in order to protect housing that would make able this building renovating and public space renovating without generating that people are forced to. Because at least if you're making public investment in the press areas, it's in order to make better the quality of life, to improve quality of life of people that are living in there, not in order to kick them out. But that's, well, it's really like you have to have an alienation of a lot of levels of public administration, which I think we did not achieve.
Well, can I bring you in on this? Talking a little bit about the work that you're thinking about around working with councils?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, we launched our charter on Saturday, a 10-point charter of what we expect, what we would like to expect from our local authorities. And I think they've got a key role to play potentially in this. And we are seeing some really quite radical approaches being taken across the country. Places like Bristol that have got very transparent policies embedded in their housing strategies and their role as enablers. And I think that's key if we're going to make this movement grow and build. So yeah, we've launched a 10-point charter. We want all our local authorities in our region to adopt these policies, transparent land disposal policies, hot potato right here, right now. But it's important, that I've been involved with Homebaked for a long time, but Homebaked sometimes has had more attention through the local authorities than other community-led projects in the city. And we want to make that much more equal and transparent and clear. But also recognising Becky's point, I think, which is our local authorities, that they are so strapped for cash and have been for such a long time, that actually the staff resource there is really difficult. But unless you unlock that, I think that's really important. And going back a little bit to the SAFE situation, I'm not criticising SAFE, and I'm part of the SAFE family with the Breaking Ground Hub. But just because you've got a great scheme and it's right on and we're all sexy and it's wonderful, that doesn't mean it necessarily will just sail through planning. And you have to really understand your context and work it and get those people round the table. To really understand, or take over the council, or get your people nominated into positions of power, because just because you've got a great scheme, we still have some very archaic structures, and that's just reality. Whether you're a community-led housing scheme, a housing association scheme, a big developer, all housing, the problem is in England, all housing takes so long, no matter who's delivering it, and that's got to change. So we've taken the decision with our hub to be quite demanding of, we've also asked for money. We want a £3.6 million fund to enable this to happen. And we want that now. We're not going to, and if that's not going to happen, this hub will not continue. We're either doing this seriously and enabling it, or we'll wrap up and go home. So that's kind of our approach. But it's just been great hearing some of these examples. I think it just helps to hear this stuff.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting in what stuck with me from what you said, Jess, was when you went into also starting is it called Better Hastings? So you started
changing Hastings.
So you also started to campaign, and I sometimes think in Liverpool, that is our next step, is to for example work together with ACON, work together with the more campaign and the like organizations and activist organizations that look at protecting the rents and protecting renters in a way that we kind of, we know that we're working on the doing, and we are also working on the influencing. And I know we all have never enough time in the day, but it seems really important to make those connections, and to make those connections also across the UK, for example, to Jess, to Nudge in Plymouth, to work together on maybe finding a way of building up the capital. So for me, there are those two kind of pathways that I take from today as a really important thing to take forward.